Welcome to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and their journey. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm one of the co-hosts of this show. And, every week we get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs of all kinds of different companies. We've had an array of different companies on here, and you can check out the archives to see all the different episodes that we've had on there. And of course, this episode brought to you by EO San Francisco. EO San Francisco is the local chapter in the San Francisco Bay Area of Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global peer-to-peer network of more than 18,000 individual business owners across 200 chapters, 60 plus countries. So if you're the founder, co-founder, owner, or controlling shareholder of a company that generates over $1 million a year in revenue, and you want to connect with other like-minded, successful entrepreneurs, EO is the right fit for you. And of course, we do that here in the Bay Area. The EOSF chapter was founded in 1991. Today has over 120 members in all kinds of different industries. To learn more about it, you can go join us for a test drive. You can go to eonetwork.org/San Francisco to learn more about everything that we do. And of course, I am the co-founder and I'm a volunteer member of the board of directors for EO San Francisco, co-founder of Rise 25, which is a B2B podcast company. And my guest here today is Greg Weitzman. He is a certified EOS implementer, has a long background with EOS, which is based on the book Traction by Gino Wickman, which is over my shoulder at all times. Keep it close by. It's a wonderful book, and it's a great system and process and operating system for businesses. Of course, we're going to get into that whole background. But Greg, pleasure to have you here. And I love to start people off to know a little bit more about them, what they were like as a kid. You moved a lot as a kid. I didn't move as much as you. I moved a couple of times significantly across the country. I thought it was a big deal for me, for my upbringing. But you've 19 times in your life you've moved, including abroad, Belgium, Hungary. And you started a business. It was like an early DoorDash in Belgium. So let's hear about that.
John, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. As a kid, I moved around quite a bit. My dad's work, people always asking, were you an Army brat or what happened? But I was a corporate brat. My dad worked for Citigroup at the time and took roles took us across the world. So lived in Belgium and in Budapest, Hungary when I was young. And I like to say my entrepreneurship journey started there in Belgium. I was a kid out on the school playground, and I was telling my classmates, hey, I'm willing to walk across the quad to go get some snacks for us, and I'll take your money. If you're willing to give me, 10 cents, a quarter, I'll bring back your snacks and I'll take my cut. And so I would, and I'd walk home. I'd come home from school. My mom would look at me and she'd say, how did you get all these coins? Like, where are these coming from? So I guess I had the entrepreneurship itch when I was young at that time.
And then they also lit a fire under you and said, you want to buy when you're a little bit older, I guess imagine around 16 or something, if you want a car, you need to raise the money yourself to get it. And tell us how you did that.
Yeah. So I grew up playing piano. It's always been a big passion of mine. I actually went to school on a piano scholarship, thought I was going to write music for movies. And obviously my life went a different path. But my parents told me that if I wanted to get my first car, that I had to contribute, at least 75% of the money to help purchase it. So I used that piano talent, and I decided that I was going to find a local studio. This was here in the Bay Area, in Lafayette, that would be willing to help produce the CD for a high school kid. I would pay them back the money kind of through the CD sales, and ended up raising about $10,000 through selling the CD different places at the school, even a little bit at Tower Records, able to raise enough money to help buy my first car.
For all you young kids listening to this, Tower Records was a place where people sold music in a physical location. I know it sounds crazy today, but that's the way it used to be done. Tower Records was the place to go. I remember going there as a kid and getting concert tickets, and how fun it was to look through all the new albums and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
One question, 19 moves. Did you bring a piano with you through each of those moves, or did you have a keyboard? What did you do?
Most of the moves when I was a kid, I have this baby grand piano that kind of traveled with us, and it took up probably too much space, but I loved it, and my parents enjoyed that I was playing it. So That came with us. And then when I went off to school, to college, different things, I just had a keyboard and I had
Got
that
it.
keyboard. But fun fact, my parents had called me, and this was probably 5 years ago, and they said, uh, "We're getting rid of this thing." And I said, "Don't do that. It's my childhood piano. I need it. I want it." So I ended up convincing them to send it to me instead, and I've got it here. Got it
Oh,
where I
that's
live
great.
now.
That's great. I took piano lessons when I was a kid from the wife of Don Gardner. Don Gardner wrote the song "All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth." Is kind of like his pride and joy. And they had like 5 pianos in their living room and would do piano lessons all the time. So it was really cool.
That's awesome.
So you make money off of this. You go to school on a piano scholarship, but you found yourself kind of slaving away one day in the dungeon of some building playing piano and had to ask yourself, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah, I call it the dungeon, like you said. It's a small box which has just enough room for you and the piano. And I would spend hours in there practicing away. And I was asking myself, is this all I want to do with my life? 110%. And I like too many other things. I enjoyed business. I was curious about psychology and sociology. And so I ended up deciding not to continue that. Went into psychology and found my way after I graduated, in some way following my dad, and went into banking. And so everyone says, "Oh, you went to school for music. That's great." And then you became a banker. Got it.
I'm sure do people outwardly accuse you of being a sellout to your face, or is it just in the tone of the way they ask about it?
It's the tone. They go, "So when did you give up on your passion?" And I go, I don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed a lot of parts of banking. I love getting to work with business owners and hear their stories, and how they were doing what they were doing, and feeling like I was part of the team that was supporting and helping them. So I really did enjoy that, and that's actually what brought me closer to what I'm doing now, which I absolutely love. And
And you still get to play piano every day.
it's
Yeah.
instead of a vocation, it's an avocation. I
Yeah.
play every day.
By the way, you mentioned kind of the diversity of life, and you moved around. You lived in Belgium, Hungary. I've interviewed people from Belgium. In fact, I interviewed a guest that I think it was Belgium, left Belgium and moved to the United States because of the anti-Semitism there.
Mm,
And your grandparent, you said you had 2 grandparents that were in Auschwitz during World War II. Was it a grandfather and grandmother that
yeah.
they're both there? Okay.
Yeah, my mom's mom and father were in Hungary, World War II. They were actually taken to Dachau and Auschwitz.
And they were
Uh,
liberated.
they were liberated. They survived,
Wow.
and there's some amazing stories with that. But they ended up coming over to the U.S., and that's where my mom was born, in New York. And my grandfather owned a leather factory, was an entrepreneur, did that actually in New York and then Jamaica. So it's a fascinating story, kind of about survival on them and kind of what they had to do to escape. We actually went back with my grandmother to Auschwitz with her,
Wow.
which I don't
Wow.
know who has this. I don't know if I could ever have the strength to go back and face something like that.
How old were you when you went?
Must have been 12,
What
11.
was that like for you and for her?
It felt, I mean, for her, in some way, it was almost like she was just walking you through. And yep, this is where our bunks were. And in some way, it was almost like she was just giving you a tour of anything else and walking through. And you could kind of tell she wasn't, at this point, she's since passed away, but she just had this, I want to say coldness, but almost detachment
The
from.
only way she could manage to go back there
Yeah.
if you have some sense of detachment, because otherwise it would probably be too overwhelming.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, you're in a place which feels like horror. It feels like atrocities were absolutely committed there. And
Yeah.
you're, even as a kid, you can just feel the weight of the place when you're there. So
Yeah. 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 Um, and so And by the way, I want to just, mention so my business partner, Jeremy, his grandfather was a Holocaust survivor and was in a couple of different concentration camps, I believe. And, his story was captured through the Holocaust Foundation that captured videos of many of the survivors to capture their stories and preserve them for future generations. My grandfather was a B-17 pilot and captain, did 35 missions, somehow survived. I don't know how he survived on B-17s, 35 missions over Nazi Germany.
Wow.
And Jeremy and I like to think that his grandfather and my grandfather, who didn't know each other, obviously, but they were kind of fighting the same righteous cause, one from the ground, one from the air. But yeah, just the horrors of that, period of time in our history.
Yeah.
And what kind of an impact did that have on you, as you grew up, or is that something that you thought about later in life?
It's something I thought about. I mean, later in life, as I feel like as a kid, you're kind of going through the motions and
Yeah.
going where you need to go. But my parents, I remember my dad passed away 3 years ago, and I remember him asking me, maybe it was probably 5 years prior. He's like, did we screw you up by moving you around, by moving you around and bouncing you around when you were a kid? And I'm like, well, we're all a little screwed up in some way. I think it's not so much that did you screw me up, it's what different baggage did you leave me with than if we had grown up all in one town and I never got a chance to see the world?
Oh
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally, I moved around a bit as a kid and always across country, not different, into other countries, but I feel like it's such a it's such an asset because when I got to college, it was like, oh, this is just a new thing. Some people are like homesick. I'm like, why are you homesick? Like, I'm used to like going to class with a bunch of new people.
I totally relate with that, and I
Yeah,
think on in some level, it's made me really flexible. It's made me really adaptable. I can get thrown into a new setting, and it's okay. Here we go. On the other hand, every 2 years, I get the itch to shake stuff up in my life,
you know
and
what? I do too. Yeah. I was just talking with some other EO members recently, and they were like, "You really kind of mix it up. You've had like 5 or 6 different careers." I'm like, "Yes, I have."
yeah.
Yeah, it's like you kind of get that itch. Oh, so I was going to ask you. So you actually ended up living in Belgium, Hungary, some of these places that were experienced the horrors of
Mhm.
World War II. I don't know if you were too young at the time, but did the fact that your heritage was from there, that your parents had been held hostage, had been sent to concentration camps in some of these countries, did that have an impact on you going back and living in these places?
At the time, I'm gonna say no, not at the time. In
Yeah.
reflection, I think it totally broadened my exposure and opened my eyes to other cultures, to history in a completely different way. When we're learning, world history in high school, you have a little bit of a different take than kids who maybe haven't
Yeah.
traveled outside of the states. But for me, what was so interesting is that here I am 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and I'm in international schools with kids from all over the world. And it opens your eyes to the fact that, how the similarities that exist between different cultures as your kids and how that similarity starts to we lose sight of that
Yeah.
because we aren't exposed you're not exposed to it when you're a kid, and I think that's one thing that's helped me a lot in my life as moved around my career, as I moved around as a human being, is just the ability to, like you said, um, shift, adapt, be a chameleon, and recognize the similarities in people.
Yeah.
Smile
Now,
long way kind of thing.
Another inspiration of the work that you do is a bit of a passion for people that have just struggle with disabilities, whether physical or mental. And you've been touched by that in your family. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mentioned my grandfather earlier. He was an entrepreneur, had the leather factory. But I remember, when I was really young, he went in for a routine back surgery. Doctor screwed up, came out, and he was paraplegic.
Mm,
And he was using a wheelchair for the rest of his life while he was alive.
mm,
Um, and just the struggles of whether it was care for him, whether it was access, whether it was mobility, there's a lot of challenges and struggles with it. And I've had other family members that have struggled with invisible disabilities, mental disabilities, and things that have been a real struggle for them, whether it be at work or just how they navigate the world. So it has been a big passion of mine to you know to think about that issue and how it pertains to specifically the workplace. And that's actually, as I left banking and did that for some time, one of our customers, it's an organization, Galt Foundation, had said, "Hey, we want you to come work for us and be on our leadership team." And they were an organization that helped people with disabilities find employment, specifically at government agencies. And so this kind of personal connection that I'd seen in my family, in addition to one of my clients saying, "Hey, we'd love for you to come do this," I thought, what an opportunity. And that's what led me to leave banking to go be part of Galt,
Hmm.
which coincidentally was running on EOS. And that was my exposure, which ultimately led me here.
So that got you to EOS. And what was it about the EOS system that had such a big impact on your life?
Coming from the bureaucracy of something like banking, the political nature of banking,
Yeah.
like I said, when did you sell out? It's funny to me. I went from that environment to something like an EOS company where it's about transparency and open and honest and visibility and numbers and accountability, all these things. It just resonated. And also, EOS isn't, I like to say EOS is simple, but it's not easy.
Hmm.
And being a musician, logic, order, construction, right? I think there's
Hmm.
actually a lot of similarities between music and something in a system like EOS, because music is all about structure. But the beauty of what happens isn't so much how rigid it is, it's about the interpretation and bringing to life what's on the page and how all these parts have form a conversation and fit together. EOS is very much a system, but it's a system to focus and align human energy so that you can exceptionalize the humanity within a company. And I think that's what I love about it.
Yeah. And I hear of EOS mostly in the for-profit world with companies, startup companies, established companies, bootstrap companies, VC funded companies.
Mhm.
But I guess it can work anywhere. Obviously, you can work within a nonprofit. It doesn't need to be a for-profit company.
There's even a book, The EOS Life. You can use it in your personal life.
Yeah.
There are principles of EOS that can apply and help just about anybody. That said, EOS as a system was built for companies with for-profit companies with 10 to 250 employees in size. They're growth oriented, they're open-minded, they're willing to be vulnerable, and they're afraid of the status quo and want to make a change. That's who it's made for. A nonprofit absolutely can use these tools, and there are many that do. But some, if they're kind of coming into it, we always like to kind of caveat and say the system wasn't designed for you. A lot will work here, but you may find that we have to kind of tweak some stuff to make it fit. And that's not EOS's fault. It's just EOS wasn't made for those companies.
Yeah. Now, when you came into Galt Foundation, they were already using it, so you weren't the integrator, is the term within the company, right? And
Correct.
then you founded another company after that, Flexability, and then you implemented it into that company. Is that right?
Correct. And I was the
Okay.
integrator of Flexability. My business partner, Nancy, we ran Flexability using EOS, used an implementer. So I like to say that I've seen EOS both from being part of a leadership team, from being an integrator, and now an implementer. So I've seen it from a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah. And then after that, you decided that you would go and help, and that's frequently the case. But people frequently they use it in their own business, and then they decide this is so amazing, this is so life changing that I need to help others with it. What kind of impact did you see when you implemented it in your company?
I think the biggest part is just it's meant to clear out the noise. There's a lot of stuff that gets thrown at you, and it just helps you to sink in and focus on what's really important. What are my rocks and priorities? How do I stay on top of those and focused and communicative and solve problems and think about people? So the biggest thing that I saw is it really just got us really focused on what do we got to do to get where we want to go. And in a world where there's so much changing and there's a lot coming at you, a system like this that keeps you focused is really powerful.
And how, so we're recording this in, heading into mid 2024. There's a lot of changes that are happening right now. The economy's really been kind of uncertain over the last year. AI is affecting a lot of different businesses and will affect a lot of businesses in the future. Talk a little bit about kind of the impact that you see right now, or what is your eye on in terms of how it's helping businesses, if there are any, flavors or nuances to the current economy that we're in.
Yeah, what I like to think about is that EOS is good at helping you is giving you a structure and a format to say, what do we got to focus on and how do we hold ourselves accountable and get alignment of our teams to get where we want to go. We call it vision, traction, healthy. AI absolutely disrupting the world, disrupting businesses and industries. Something like that, what EOS can do is to, one, give you at least a method, is sort of a framework to operate from, one that has a really good structure. You can see kind of the wheel behind me of the 6 key components, but it's a good framework to operate from so that you can, one, know if you're running a strong and stable business as these changes arise. So it's getting you into the fundamentals of, do we have clarity of our vision? Do we have the right people in the right seats? Are we using data effectively, solving problems at their root, clear process? And are we really creating great accountability and having execution throughout our company? Disruptions will come along. At least you've got a strong, stable business. And now when you make decisions about what you need to focus on, you have a method to do that. So EOS isn't going to give you the answers. What it's going to do is flip the light on so that you see what problems are facing you and you have a choice to face them or not.
And for those who aren't familiar with it, they can get started by reading the book if they want. There's lots of content online. There's videos on YouTube. I think you guys typically do some kind of like consultation or initial session or something like that. What does it look like for anyone listening to this who's curious about dipping their toes in the water and experiencing it? What do you recommend people do?
So reading traction is always it's a great starting point. If you choose to implement with an implementer or otherwise, reading traction is still something that we're going to suggest you do. But every EOS implementer is happy to give you what we call a 90-minute meeting, absolutely free. There's no cost to it. It's just sitting down with us for us to walk you through the background of EOS, all the different tools that support vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction, the 6 key components of what makes a business, helps you run a great business, and the process of how you should implement those. So we walk you through that over 90 minutes. That's a great starting point for a company that wants to explore this as an option. And if nothing else, I can send you a link. Every implementer's got a website and there's tons of free stuff on there. Blogs, tools, you can download different things and just learn about all the different stuff and how it can affect your business. And there's also software out there too. So there's a lot of ways to get exposed to this. And every implementer is happy to talk to you and just help you understand how to find these things and how you might use them.
We'll certainly link that up in the show notes, but for anyone who's listening to this in the car or whatever, where can they go to learn more about you, Greg?
Yes, they can go to www.eosworldwide.com/Greg, Greg Weitzman, my last name, Weitzman. So www.eosworldwide.com/Greg-Weitzman.
Greg, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast. This episode is powered by Rise 25. Please subscribe and check out future episodes.